This is the news roundup here on Block TV, and I am Amina Sawane. Thank you for joining us. Tonight on the program, the government of the United States has levied sanctions on former First Lady of the Gambia, Zainab Jumba Jambe, for being a husband enabler by providing support to persons previously designated for their own corrupt behavior. Investigation into Fatou Diba's death, a mother who died at the country's main hospital, completed. The Gambian National Assembly has debunked claims that it was engaged in discrimination of media houses after denying some media houses entry to the National Assembly. Gambia health officials on Wednesday forced into quarantine passengers arriving on the Brussels Airlines flight, despite having valid COVID-19 negative tests, results from the United States. The country's only independent stadium under massive renovation to improve the quality of the football pitch as required by CAF and FIFA to host international matches. I am Amita Sawane. Let's start off with this rather bizarre story. The government of the United States has levied sanctions on former First Lady of the Gambia, Zainab Jambe, for being a husband enabler by providing support to persons previously designated for their own corrupt behavior. In a statement that went ahead to state the case against Zainab, said that Zainab has been reportedly instrumental in aiding and abetting Jambe's economic crimes against the country, and despite numerous calls for her to intervene, she turned a blind eye to Jambe's human abuses. The implementation of the sanction includes that all property and interest in property of Zainab Jambe and of any entities that are owned directly or indirectly 50% or more of her individually or other blocked persons that are in the United States or in the possession or control of U.S. persons are blocked and must be reported to OFAC. Investigation into Fatou Diba's death, a mother who died at the country's main hospital. The hospital had called for calm as it launched an investigation into Mrs. Diba's death. The PRO of the hospital, Keba Nyancho Sane, disclosed yesterday that its investigation into the matter are over, and the report has been sent to the Ministry of Health, the Medical Council, and the AG's chambers, who will decide the next course of action. He said, I accept this whole matter to be resolved in not more than 2 weeks, Mr. Sane told the Standard. Asked to expound the details about the report, Mr. Sane said he was not at liberty to do so, but he added that he expected some form of administrative punishment for those found guilty. But he was quick to state that the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital will not accept what happened to Mrs. Diba as entirely its fault. I think what many fail to understand is that the Edward Francis Small Teaching Hospital alone cannot be entirely responsible for the fate of Mrs. Diba. We will not soldier all the blame. The ASB clinic where she was operated for a child delivery should not have sent her to us in the first place, knowing that she showed symptoms of COVID. Mr. Sane said he told the management of the hospital, also met and listened those staff implemented in the matter. The Gambia National Assembly has debunked claims that it has engaged in discrimination of media houses after denying some media houses entry to the National Assembly. On Monday, only 3 media houses, including GRTS, QTV, and iAfrica, were allowed to cover the first reading of the constitutional bill. However, the National Assembly gave reasons that the National Assembly was aware of the severity of the COVID-19 situation in the Gambia, so therefore considered the need to convene the session in a safe and conducive manner. The Gambia Press Media, however, organized a press briefing to address the issue. We joined by Lamin Jahate, the program manager for Gambia Press Union. Thank you so much for joining us. Mr. Jahati, a majority of the media houses, especially the print, were denied entry to cover Parliament's debate on the draft constitution. What does this mean to the Gambia's media fraternity?
Thank you so much, Aminata, for that question. What happened on Monday at the National Assembly was very unfortunate. It was a huge setback in our efforts to make sure we have unhindered access to the media, to public information, and to make sure the entire citizenry of the Gambia have access to public information. This was a very huge setback. What exactly happened was when journalists went to the parliament on Monday to cover that important proceedings of the parliament, that was the day the bill promulgating the new constitution of the Gambia was being tabled by the minister and to be discussed by the National Assembly members. That was a very, very important session, not only for the National Assembly members, but in the history of this country, because it will be the day that will mark effort or that will kickstart the process of introducing or Gambia having its third Republican constitution. Journalists, all the media houses took interest in this session, and all of them went to the National Assembly to cover, only to be discriminated by the parliamentary authorities to say only three of the media houses would be allowed entry to cover the session of that day. This was very problematic because it was discriminatory to the core. I mean, all the media houses are important. All of them have their unique audience. Therefore, all of them should be given unhindered access to cover this important session and distribute it to their audience and to their readership. And the other reason why it is problematic is it was never communicated prior. When you are going to come up with this kind of policies, you make sure that you have discussion with people, particularly those who matter. In this case, the media themselves, the media houses themselves. You don't take such a discriminatory policy, you don't take such a discriminatory directive about the media without engaging the media prior. So all the journalists left what they were supposed to do in their offices, forgo all the other things that they were supposed to cover, to go to the parliament only to be led to stand outside, only to be denied entry to cover this important proceeding. So this was very problematic because the principle in freedom of expression and access to information is open access. Journalists should be given access, particularly to public information. The National Assembly members are there for the public. Therefore, whatever they do should be known by the public. And it is only the media who can transmit the information or who can transmit whatever they are doing to the parliament to the people who send these people into the parliament. So that was rather unfortunate. And what this thing exactly means to the Gambian media is, I mean, the much talked about or the much needed freedom of expression that we are all yearning for is still far fetched. We still have a long way to go in our drive to make sure we have access to information, in our drive to make sure we have media freedom, in our drive to make sure the constitutional provision to freedom of expression are respected. It's still a far-fetched dream. We still have a lot of work to do, but I think eventually we will get there. Eventually we will get there.
Considering recent developments of allegations of censorship from the executive and now the legislature, where does this put Gambia's freedom of press standing?
When it comes to freedom of press, I must first say that I think presently it's not as bad as it was, let's say, 4 years before now. But that is not to say that the environment is as good as we want it, because all the draconian laws that were enacted during the former regime, we still have all those laws in our law books, and all the decisions or almost all the bad decisions that were usually taken by the executive or by the government against the media or to guard the media's access to freedom of information or access to information, we still have authorities in this government doing the same thing. Just like you said, we still have executive censorship. Not really sure whether it's censorship, but we still have the executive denying the press access to information. We are now seeing the legislature also denying the press access to information, and all these things are happening because in this country, up to now, in fact, the only English-speaking country in West Africa that does not have access to information or freedom of information law in the country. The Gambia Press Union has taken it upon ourselves. I mean, hire a consultant, develop an access to information law or freedom of information law. This law was developed by the entire civil society in this country, eventually submitted to the Ministry of Justice. It was discussed at the cabinet level. The cabinet gave it its blessing, but it's still stuck at the National Assembly. The last legislative session of the parliament, they were supposed to discuss it to have it enacted. That was never completely done. This time we thought it was going to be part of the agenda unfortunately or surprisingly, it is not featured on the agenda. So that is to say, I mean, our legislature and even the executive have not really shown their full political will to make sure Gambian journalists and Gambian citizens have access to information. And the press freedom thing, we see all the laws against press freedom or all the laws against free flow of information or all the laws that are against the free operation of the media and journalists in this country are still there and active and being used, if you like. So we still have a long way to go when it comes to press freedom in this country. I mean, there still needs to be a lot of advocacy needs to be done. A lot of advocacy needs to be done when it comes to our engagement with the executive, our engagement with the legislature. So we still have a long way to go, really. We still have a long way to go when it comes to the full realization of freedom of expression and access to information in this country.
Okay, what steps have the GPU taken to address the restrictions implemented by the parliament's clerk?
On Monday, as soon as we had the information about the discriminatory practice or denial of the media to enter to cover that important proceedings of the National Assembly, the leadership of the GPU immediately went to the National Assembly to discuss with the clerk, who is the administrative head of the parliament and the parliament's director of communication. We engaged them to fully understand what informed their decision or what was the rationale for taking that discriminatory directive. And they explained their own part of the story to us. They made us understand, or at least they informed us, that the decision was taken in good faith. The only reason why they took such a decision was they wanted to make sure the parliament is not congested for the safety of the journalists themselves, but also for the safety of the parliamentarians. But we let them understand that the decision is very discriminatory. It was very unilateral. You don't take such a decision about the media without involving the media, like I said. And you cannot, out of a lot of media houses that took interest or that showed interest in covering that proceeding, you cannot just take three randomly, because we understood from their discussion there was no yardstick to say we should admit this media house or that media house. It was just random. You just cherry pick the organizations that you want and left the entire ball game of media outside. That was very problematic. We let them understand that was wrong. It was completely wrong. And eventually, it was nothing conclusive was taken at that meeting, because they also needed to consult with the other authorities of the parliament. So on Tuesday, they had a meeting. I mean, the parliamentary authorities themselves, they had a meeting, and at the end of that meeting on Tuesday, they issued a statement. We were not still satisfied with that statement. So on Wednesday morning, the GPU organized or called for a press conference to let our members understood, because on Monday, the belief or the information that was given to some journalists and media house was that the Gambia Press Union was aware of such an organization by the authorities of the parliament. So at the press conference on Monday, we let the media and the entire citizen understand that that's not true. The Gambia Press Union cannot be part of an organization to discriminate against the media. The Gambia Press Union was never informed or took part in the making of that decision. So we made that clear. But we also made it clear, we also inform our members to know what have we been doing, i.e. the engagement we've been taking on Monday, the parliament's decision on Tuesday. But I mean, out of all these things, I am happy to inform you that on Wednesday, all the journalists were allowed in, and yesterday during the state opening of the National Assembly, or during the president's national address to the parliament, all the journalists were allowed. So at least there was, I mean, progress came out of our discussion, or at least some fruits were realized from our discussion with the National Assembly as far as this thing is concerned. Because on Thursday, like I said, all the media houses were allowed in. On Wednesday, all the media houses were allowed in. And on Tuesday, there was no parliamentary session. This thing happened on Monday. So our engagement paid some dividend. But we hope going forward, this kind of arrangement will never be made by the National Assembly, and the entire government in itself will never do this kind of thing. Because the press conference we organized, we also decided to send a strong message that the media was in the forefront in the fight against dictatorship, only because we thought when the new government comes, the freedom of information or the freedom of the press that they promised was going to be realized. The access to information that they promised was going to be realized, only for us to realize that in fact this is far-fetched. In fact, this is still not realized in this country. When that was our interest in the change, that was our interest in the fight against dictatorship. But unfortunately, that interest is still a far-fetched dream. But like I keep saying, we will continue pushing, we will continue engaging all the arms of government to make sure that the media is free and is able to operate in a free environment, and there is free flow of public information, or at least there is free access to public information by the media.
Mr. Jahate, thank you for your time. Gambia quarantine U.S. arrivals even with COVID-19 negative test clearance. Gambia health officials on Wednesday forced into quarantine passengers arriving on a Brussels air flight despite having valid COVID-19 negative tests. From the United States, the passengers were taken to a hotel in the outskirts of the Senegambia area where they refused to pay for rooms. Passengers said they have negative test results and demanded to be allowed to go to their final destinations. The arrival guests include a 50-year-old woman who left the U.S. after the Gambia's government promised not to quarantine those that have negative test results that were taken 72 hours before travel. The Gambia, with a population of just over 2 million, has recorded 2,743 cases since the outbreak in March. Mainland Africa's smallest country recently amended its quarantine regulations to request travelers to show a negative COVID-19 test taken to more than 72 hours before they travel to be exempt from quarantine. Those traveling to the Gambia and will be quarantined will be responsible for the cost of quarantining. The country's only independent stadium under massive renovation to improve the quality of the football pitch as required by CAF and FIFA to host international matches. The Independent Stadium's football pitch is currently in fine shape to host the Gambia and Gabon 2021 Nations qualifiers in November 2020. The Scorpions will welcome the Panthers in Group D fixtures of the continent's biannual biggest football fiesta at the country's biggest football arena. Following the story, I'm joined by a sport journalist, Aliu Sise. Aliu, thank you so much for joining us. Is this an indication that the country's oldest stadium wouldn't have been renovated if it wasn't a requirement by CAF and FIFA to host international matches?
Thank you very much, Amina. Yes, quite very interesting question there that so many people are asking whether, if not for this requirement by CAF, that the stadium would have undergone such a renovation. Well, what is certain is that in the past we have seen the stadium going under such renovation when international games are approaching. But then what we know is that the stadium is quite in a very deplorable condition, knowing the fact that this stadium was established in the early 1980s and hasn't gone under a major refurbishment. So not only just refurbishing this stadium, many will have expected that by now, as a country will have had at least a second stadium that we can rely on. But as we speak, the stadium is very old, and then you realize that even the capacity of the stadium now when the national team is playing, they have to cut down the actual capacity of the stadium just to ensure that the stadium people are safe and secure while watching games. So whether or not the management of the stadium will have embark on such renovation work, what is important is that at least the stadium is now being given some sort of attention and it is being renovated.
Well, this is a new season for the Scorpions. As a sport journalist, what do you foresee?
Yes, I mean, if there's any chance that the Scorpions have ever had of making it to AFCON, is this time around. I mean, quite interesting. Hopes are very high, not only among the players, but even fans and journalists, that this time around the Scorpions will really take advantage of this opportunity of making it to AFCON in 2022. We understand that it should have been 2021, but because of the COVID-19 and then the change of schedule in playing the qualifiers, now the tournament has to be pushed to early 2022. And then we hope the Scorpions, will take advantage of this opportunity. No doubt, Coach Thompson Fit has all what it takes. He has the players who can deliver, and we are hopeful that the boys will deliver when they face Gabon in November for these two games in Gabon and in Banjul.
Thank you so much, Aliu, for your time. This is all we have for you today. Thank you so much for your time and have a beautiful rest of your day.